Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Richman here, together in the studio once again with the inimitable, ever-gracious Samara, filling in for my best friend and yours, Yitzchak Reuven, still away at an undisclosed location, but not for long. Today, the 28th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, 5780. That means it's November 26th, 2019, and this week the Torah portion of Toldot. And may I also say that this week, in fact, Wednesday night, that is to say beginning Wednesday night and Thursday and Friday, is Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, the beginning of the new month of Kislev, the month of Hanukkah. So the first day of Kislev will be Friday, the 29th day of November. And that means that Hanukkah is fast approaching. Actually, it will begin this year on the night of Sunday, the 22nd of December, next month. And again, the month of Kislev revolves around the concept of the rededication of the Second Temple during the Hashmonai period of the miraculous and victorious victory of the Hashmonai priests over the Greek invaders who defiled the temple and who sought to drive a wedge between Israel and her God, who actually issued decrees when they were occupying the land of Israel. They issued decrees that forbade the Jewish people from studying the Torah and from circumcising their children, from keeping Shabbat, and from keeping the new moon, from counting the months. You might ask, what is this? What is its significance that when a superpower that's obviously motivated by a desire to spiritually oppress the people, why do they make a decree against Rosh Chodesh? Because the new moon, Rosh Chodesh, is the secret of renewal for the Jewish people, the secret of the moon cycle, secret of starting all over again, constantly. And of course, the holiday of Hanukkah, rather unsung and misunderstood by many people who just think it's some sort of Jewish Christmas, some sort of winter holiday for giving gifts, and instead of a tree we have a menorah with candles and that sort of thing. The fact is, Hanukkah has nothing to do with any of that. And it's also not about eating potato pancakes or spinning tops or eating jelly donuts, although all those things definitely have their place in tradition and there's a deep reason for them. But the real idea of Hanukkah is it's about the rededication of the soul, rededication of every person. It's about this mysterious concept of the hidden light with which God created the world in the beginning of the Genesis narrative, and he saw the light and it was good. And this light, which emanates from God himself, which is the light of true kindness, the light of the whole purpose of mankind, the whole purpose of creation, according to the Midrash, God saw that it was too good for this world, too good to be true almost, and so he hid it. He hid it away for the future rectified world to be enjoyed by the righteous in the world to come. This is the language of the sages, and we have a tradition that even though that is true, that on Wednesday the lights were created, the sun and the moon, and those are the lights that govern over the world, as it were, and the hidden light is hidden. But still in awe, every year during the festival of Hanukkah, when we kindle those lights, there is something of that special, supernal, original, primordial, divine light that is revealed. And thus, you'll find a strange thing. You'll find that the festival of Hanukkah is very beloved even by Jewish people that are rather disenfranchised, that are rather alienated from their tradition, and maybe that are actually don't consider themselves observant at all, and it doesn't speak to them. But people love Hanukkah, and the reason for that is because, maybe even unbeknownst to them, it does resonate on a deep level of the soul, because we are rekindling the light of the Holy Temple. We are rekindling the light of Aaron, the high priest, that he kindled in the great menorah in the Holy Temple that shone forth throughout the windows of the Holy Temple to bring the light of the Shekhinah into the world, the divine presence. And it's a little taste of the hidden light of creation that is released during the first half hour of every night of Hanukkah while the candles are burning. In fact, there's this whole idea that the Hanukkah candles are so intense. First of all, There's an idea that our sages tell us that gazing into the light of the Hanukkah candles is a cure for the eyes. It's healthy for vision. It rectifies misused vision. And there's an idea. I know it's very early, folks, for me to be talking about Hanukkah because it's not for another month. But as I'm going to be announcing very soon the schedule for the next few weeks of Temple Talk, I'm not going to be with you, and Yitzchak Reuven is going to be taking over soon, again flying solo, maybe with Samara if she deigns, Deigns, to help out. Because I'm going to be not at an undisclosed location, but on a speaking tour in the United States, of which I will give you the details. So I'm telling you a little bit now about Hanukkah in advance because I'm excited, because Kislev is happening this week, and the whole concept of Kislev is all about the light that's released. And so there's this idea that while the Hanukkah candles are burning, even though, people put it on the table in the living room and they do the thing and they eat supper or whatever, or here in the land of Israel, of course, we place it outside the house, which is very, very important. But still in all, during that time that it's burning, people should not really be doing anything else, honestly. They should, if it's at all possible, they should be sitting and gazing into the candles. And there's an idea that I'm sure our wives were very happy to hear, that they're not supposed to do any housework while the candles are burning. So tell your husband that you can't do the dishes right now. First of all, he should be doing the dishes. And I'm not just saying that to get extra points because my wife is listening, because she probably isn't listening. But the fact is, come on, husbands, don't leave these things to your wives. Your wives are holier than you, and they shouldn't be wasting their time doing dishes. But while the candles are burning, really, we should be gazing into that light because it is an antiseptic. It is an antibiotic, and it's good for what ails you. It's very, very good for the eyes. Anyway, the mystery, though, of why is it that only during Hanukkah is that hidden light released? Why is that, though? That's a good question. Okay, so there's this idea of hidden light in the world that was put away by the Holy One, blessed be He, for the future. How come it's not released on Passover night? How come it's not released, say, in your sukkah? I don't know. Why specifically is it released as the Hanukkah candles are burning? Well, I'm not going to tell you now. If you're fortunate enough to be in the audience in Northwest Arkansas or Lubbock, Texas, or Loveland, Colorado, you might hear me telling you. Or else I'll tell you when I get back. Or else, I don't know. Figure it out on your own. Or else you already know, because you know everything, you gentle listener, because you're very deep and your soul is very high. And I'm sure you already know the answer, but let's ponder it together. Why is it only released during Hanukkah? That's very, very special. Anyway, Parshat Toldot, Samara. Here we are in the book of Brishit. Generations are going by, and the book of Brishit, of course, it's been referred to by our great masters as the book of stories. Even though it's not a storybook at all, it does contain the stories of these early generations from creation on, the early righteous people and their spiritual struggles as they basically blazed a trail that we are still benefiting from and still traversing in our time. Huge, huge men who were only men, but who were so real that they were able to become conduits for Hashem's light in this world, which is our goal in this world. And so we read these Torah portions, and some people look at them as fables. Some people look at them as this whole idea of Bible stories, and it's a kind of a misconception the way we view these things. And part of that is because we really don't have the vessels to understand that how this works, what we're being taught here. We're being taught things that are so crucial and fundamental in our worldview and in our understanding of our own lives. We learned about Adam, we learned about the tree of knowledge, we learned about the Garden of Eden, and we learned about those generations, and we learned about the flood, and we learned about the Tower of Babel, and we learned about Abraham. And all these things, they're not once upon a time things. These are stories that are related to us. They're not anecdotal, but that are the stuff of life. They are so eternal and so real and so true because they point out for us our own walk in life, in our own, the choices that we have to make, and basically the cosmic themes that are hewn into the fabric of existence by God Himself to test us. And there's nothing new under the sun. We are trying to find our own center, as it were. But the thing is, as we read these stories, they're so totally foundational and so totally. What I mean by foundational is that, for example, now as we read about Yaakov and Esav, these men, they are archetypes. Is it archetype or archetype? Archetype. They're archetypes. These are powerful forces that we're learning about. That what's laying in the balance, what's hanging in the balance, is the fate of mankind, is the direction that man is going to be going into. And honestly, nothing has changed. And just as a preamble, I'll just interrupt myself for a minute, which is not so easy. And I don't have Yitzchak to interrupt, and you're too polite to interrupt me, so I'll have to interrupt myself. The thing is, Samara, one of the secrets of Hanukkah is that this is the darkest time of year. These are the longest nights, shortest daylight hours. And that's part of the secret of a little bit of light, as it were. As people say, a little bit of light banishes the darkness. And that kind of as a little bit of an intimation of the question I was asking before, like why specifically during Hanukkah is the light released? Well, you can only appreciate light from the midst of darkness, contrast. And the thing is, I feel honestly that, and of course I'm an eternal optimist, you know that, but I feel that we're living in very dark days right now. We're living in very dark times. There is a lot of cruelty in the world, a lot of exploitation. I'm not talking on the political level, which is just a manifestation of the chaos of the human condition. But first of all, the political level is horrendous as far as that's concerned, and that's all I'll say about that at the moment. And then there is this horrible, incredible, and I won't say resurgence because it's never gone away, but there is this spike in anti-Semitism all over the world every single day. I can't keep up with it. I cannot keep up with the record amount of attacks on Jews, on synagogues, on Jewish professionals and university professors, and everything that's going on throughout Europe, which just forget about Europe, and throughout America as well.
In general, I'd say there's a tremendous lack of kindness globally from, between person to person.
Right. I was thinking about that, and just last week I witnessed just a random act of cruelty on the bus that I was on, and I was very traumatized, affected very, very deeply, and thinking to myself, because we've been emphasizing over the weeks the chesed aspect of Avraham Avinu, that Abraham's entire thing in life that gave him his life force, that gave him everything, was doing acts, even random acts of kindness, and that was for him the greatest religious experience because it was a direct imitation of Hashem himself, because Hashem created the world to bestow kindness and for opportunities for kindness. Anyway, it's all very, very disturbing, and it's about the choices that people make. And we're not a news program. I'm not going to just reiterate headlines, but the fact is, you see that as we go further away in time also from the Holocaust, there's more and more Holocaust denial, there's more and more Holocaust manipulation and exploitation, and there is also this very strong anti-Semitism, which, again, there's no excuse anymore, like I was saying last week, you can't, it used to be that people would say that they're not anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel, because of Israel's colonial occupational power and all this kind of thing. And the fact is, it's all morphed now into what it really is, which is just hatred of the Jewish people, and without any excuses. So this week's Torah portion is Parshat Toldot, and it is about the twin sons of Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Esav. And twins, on the one hand, resemble each other to some extent, but we also know that when in the case of Yaakov and Esau, there were vast differences between them. Because this actually, the Yaakov and Esav thing that we're starting to read about now in Parshat Toldot, which begins in the 19th verse of chapter 25 of the book of Bereshit this week, Parshat Toldot is a study in two diametrically opposing archetypes. And thus, these differences between them were already manifest while they were still in their mother's womb. Thus, we read, the children agitated within her, and she said, "If so, why am I thus?" And she went to inquire of Hashem, and Hashem said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, two regimes from your inside shall be separated. The might shall pass from one regime to the other, and the elder shall serve the younger," or whatever that's talking about. Behold, she came full term. There were twins in her womb. The first one emerged red, entirely like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esav. After that, his brother emerged with his hand grasping onto the heel of Esav, so he called his name Yaakov. Yitzchak was 60 years old when she bore them. These verses are so totally laden with so many levels of meaning. Later we'll read that Esav was called Edom, because Edom means red, but Esav doesn't mean red. Esav actually is a form of the word for action, and in this form it's like asui, it's like already made, already completed, because when he was born, he looked like a little man already. He was covered with hair, he had all his teeth, he was like a little man, he was a made man completely. And what does this mean, the children agitated within her? And this is why I say that these marked differences were already manifest while they were yet in the womb. So our sages teach, and this very, very famous thing that Rashi cites here, that Yaakov and Esav were struggling to get out while they were in the womb, meaning that already at the onset of their lives, they had a certain powerful drive, each of them. They had power and ambition. They had a tremendously strong will. But at this time, these huge differences between them were clear. So this is a very famous Rashi on these words of children agitated within her, that our sages teach that when Rivka would walk by a place of idolatry, Esau would be like dying to get out. He'd be like pushing to get out. And when Rivka would walk by a place of holiness, of Torah being studied, like Shem and Aver, like of where Hashem was known, then Yaakov wanted to get out. So this shows us that they each had a strong desire to lead. And in Yaakov's case, of course, this was manifested at birth because he was holding on to the heel of Esav. And then later with his purchase of the birthright. And Esav demonstrated this leadership quality by exiting the womb first, and with his terrible anguish and cry when Yaakov took the blessing from him, which made him so angry that he wanted to kill his brother. But from this earliest stage, what Esav wanted is not what Yaakov wanted. And what I'm interested in is what is the root of the difference between them. Because again, these are not stories. Nothing is here is anecdotal. This isn't to pass the time. This book is called the Book of Stories because it's about the earliest direction of creation and the earliest formation of basically the themes that we are all struggling with, that God put into motion. And this is all extremely, extremely pivotal and fundamental for us to understand. Anything on that, Samara?
Actually, I always thought it was very interesting that we learned several weeks ago that Hashem changed Avraham and Sarah's name from Avram and Sarai to Avraham and Sarah. And then they were no longer referred to as Avram and Sarai. They were, from then on, referred to as Avraham and Sarah.
The Talmud even says that there's a curse upon someone that calls Avraham Avram, because his name isn't Avram anymore, it's Avraham.
Right, so that's how we knew them from that time on. Now, we learn in this parsha that Yaakov receives another name from Hashem, which is Yisrael. And yet, from this time, he's not only known as Israel, he's also still known as Yaakov. So the question is, why? Why does he have two names? Why is there still a referral to him as Yaakov as our story continues? And I think we can possibly learn from this that it's to remain as a reminder that Yaakov purchased the Bechorah, he purchased, Rabbi Richman.
Birthright?
He purchased the birthright from Esav. Legally, it was willingly sold by Esav to Yaakov, and it's a reminder to us that nothing was stolen, nothing was taken. It was legitimate, and that's why he continues to have two names, Yaakov and Israel.
I actually have a lot to say about that. First of all, just for the sake of clarity, he doesn't receive his new name until Parshat Vayishlach.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
That's okay. That's okay. We won't start the whole program over again, even though I was tempted to cut and say, Samara, what are you doing? But you're so into the Torah portions that it all became one for you. No, that's actually takes place when he struggles with the angel in Parshat Vayishlach. That's in another two Torah portions. But yes, first of all, that's a very deep idea. Why Avraham is no longer referred to as Avram, but yet God Himself, after changing Yaakov's name to Israel, He Himself constantly uses both names. Sometimes within one verse. Sometimes He's referred to as Yaakov, and sometimes He's referred to as Israel. And that basically has to do with the fact that the word Yisrael, which is much more comprehensive, reflects a higher level of revelation, a higher level of prophecy. It's something much more eternal that has to do with the succession of all the generations. But again, we're going to be learning about that in Parshat Vayishlach. Right now, we're still in Toldot, which is just Yaakov's birth, and Yaakov as a lad, as a young man. And there's the music. So we'll be right back. Samara, you're doing a wonderful job. Stay with us on Temple Talk. Right back.
Welcome back to the second half of Temple Talk with the wonderful Rabbi Richman. I'm Samara, filling in for Yitzchak.
The wonderful.
It's the 28th day of Mar Cheshvan, 26th of November, and we are in Parshat Toldot.
And this week, Rosh Chodesh Kislev, Thursday night.
Chodesh Tov.
Wednesday night, Thursday and Friday begins the new month of Kislev. For the benefit of our listeners, Samara, before we continue and before I forget, I want to just go over the schedule of Temple Talk for the next couple of weeks. Actually, next week, that is to say, we usually have Temple Talk on. We usually record it on Tuesday. I don't know when everyone hears it, but next week, on Tuesday, December 3rd, there will be no Temple Talk next week. There will be no Temple Talk. The following week of Tuesday the 10th, as well as December, as well as Tuesday the 17th, that is to say the 12th of Kislev and the 19th of Kislev, December 10th and 17th, those weeks, God willing, Yitzchak Reuven will be back, and he will be flying solo here on Temple Talk, as I will be in America. And then on the 24th day of December, the 26th day of Kislev, on the second day of Hanukkah, God willing, Yitzchak Reuven and I will be reunited for Temple Talk. So don't forget, next week, no Temple Talk. And I just want to take this opportunity also for anyone in the area that has the opportunity, that's interested in hearing the details of our speaking in America, I'm going to be speaking about Hanukkah. In fact, the title of my presentation is called The Eternal Spiritual Significance of Hanukkah, and it's going to be about the concept of the power of light over the forces of darkness, but in the reality of our modern world, and how the universal message of Hanukkah, which is a message of hope, renewal, and spiritual fulfillment, is actually important for everyone, Jew and Gentile alike. I will be joined by renowned archaeologist Rabbi Richman, a blood relative, who will be presenting a fascinating presentation on the menorah. In fact, it's called The Light of the Menorah, and it is a study of why the menorah is an important symbol for the Jewish people, and it will explore the history and meaning of the menorah, and through the lens of history and archaeology, trace the concept of the menorah from the biblical commandment all the way through ancient and modern times. Very intriguing. We'll be speaking together on Monday, December 9th at 7 p.m. in Northwest Arkansas, in Springdale, Arkansas. On Sunday, December 15th, in the South Plains Hebraic Center in Lubbock, Texas. On Tuesday, December 17th, in Loveland, Colorado. Details of those venues and contact information for inquiries is available on the Temple Institute's website on the events page, on the Temple Institute's Facebook page, and on Rabbi Chaim Richman's Facebook page as well. Looking forward to seeing you. Back to Parshat Toldot. Tomorrow we were talking about how these two individuals, Yaakov and Esav, are actually much more than they appear to us. In the story, they are actually archetypes. In fact, a very telling verse. See, a lot of their childhood and early adulthood is skipped over. That's always a very fascinating study, what's not said, between the lines, because there are so many days and nights that are not described. But the Torah only tells us things that we must know. But all of a sudden, right after their birth, the very next verse, verse 27 in chapter 25, tells us the lads grew up and Esav became one who knows hunting, a man of the field. But Jacob was a wholesome man, is translated here, ishtam. It also could be translated as complete or perfect or simple or even naive. He was a wholesome man, abiding in tents. So Esav is a hunter, a man of the field, and Yaakov is a tent dweller, a wholesome man. Isaac loved Esav for game was in his mouth. Actually, kitzayid befiv means that his hunting was in his mouth. So it could be translated that he fed him, that he made delicacies for him, that he caught in the field. That's one way of translating it, but there are other ways of translating it too, like he hunted with his mouth. And Rebekah loved Yaakov. And then right away, the verses take us to this event which took place much later, where Jacob was cooking a stew, and Esav came in from the field. He was exhausted. And Esav said to Yaakov, Haliteni na, very unusual expression, which basically means, I'll open my mouth and you pour it down for me. Pour into me now some of that very red stuff, for I am exhausted. And the verse says, therefore his name is called Edom, which means red, which is in itself very mysterious. Just because he called the food red, why is he called red? Anyway, then we have the whole anecdote. We have the incidents of the birthright. Jacob said, sell as this day your birthright to me. And Esav said, look, I'm going to die. What use of me to me is a birthright? So Jacob said, swear to me as this day. He swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob gave Esav bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and got up and left. And thus Esav spurned the birthright. And that's basically the crux of the whole matter. So the Torah describes Esav as a hunter, and I'm interested again in the roots of the difference between Yaakov and Esav right now. What is a hunter? A a hunter is a person who basically goes around trying to take things that he wants. One second, I have a slight emergency here, just taking care of that. And okay. Now, a hunter, he knows how to take what he wants from the world. In other words, he exploits the world for his own needs. Right? So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, as opposed to like the colorful illustrated Bible story book that was in the orthodontist's office when I was a little boy. Yes, I had braces when I was a little boy in 1969 or whatever it was. That, the Torah is teaching us something very powerful here with its economical usage of words. Why is the Torah going out of its way to describe Esav as a hunter? First of all, Esav not only hunted animals, but he hunted women. As Rashi tells us in verse 26 in chapter 34, he hunted women from their husbands and molested them. When he came in from the field this very day that he wanted to sell his birthright for lentil stew, he was exhausted because he had engaged, according to our sages, in the 3 cardinal sins that day, which are idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder. So that's a pretty tiring day. Now, we just read this verse. Isaac loved Esav because of the hunting in his mouth. And so we have this teaching that Esav also hunted his father, meaning that he would fool him. He fooled him with words. You know the famous Midrash, Samara, I'm sure you learned about how Esav acted like he was very righteous, and he asked his father, like, how do you take meiser, which means a tenth from salt and from straw, acting like he wanted to keep the Torah like very scrupulously, making up all sorts of things that don't exist.
Yeah, he definitely pulled the wool over his eyes.
Exactly. He wanted his father to think he was scrupulous in observing the commandments. So his hunting was very comprehensive. It wasn't just about hunting animals. It was a worldview. It was a stance of being in a position to manipulate and exploit and take everything that he wanted. Because hunting, again, we're going very deep here because the Torah is teaching us something very, very deep. Hunting, as compared to any other pursuit, for example, farming or shepherding, if we want to stick in that type of context. Hunting is a profession that takes without giving, and that doesn't develop, but rather exploits. It's not creative. In other words, what the Torah is teaching us here in the person of Esav is that hunting, the way it's being used here, represents humanity's greatest and most severe disease, egotism. In other words, it's all about me. What can I take here? I see a woman, I see this, I see an opportunity. It's all the same because it's all about me. I am, the world revolves around me, and the world is here for me to take what I want.
It was like he was in constant pursuit of his own desires without thinking of anybody else.
Exactly. And by the way, because I don't mean to offend any hunters out there that might be listening, but seriously, Jewish people are not allowed to hunt. Absolutely forbidden to hunt. It is an exploitive, cruel, horrible pursuit. However, what about people who don't necessarily have to eat something they want to eat something that was clean, but not necessarily does it have to be slaughtered in a kosher manner? Are Noahides, Torah-observant Gentiles, God-fearing Gentiles who want to keep Hashem's Torah in their context, are they allowed to hunt? It's a good question, and many Noahides have asked this question. Is one, according to Torah law, a Gentile, allowed to hunt? And the answer is, no person is allowed to hunt for sport, Jew or Gentile. A Gentile is allowed to hunt providing that he uses what he catches for food. If he's hunting for food, there are people that live in places where they might kill a deer, and that might put that meat away for a year or more, however long, freeze it. That's actually permitted. But the idea of developing this trait within a person of hunting an animal just for the sake of pursuing it and killing it is absolutely forbidden according to the Torah.
Yeah, it would seem that would develop a wrong kind of enjoyment of something that's doesn't take you anyplace good.
This is basically the idea. Now, the Torah tells us that Esau was not only a hunter, but it uses the words he was a man of the field. And so he was a man who hunted animals and birds with his bow. Now, Yaakov, by contrast, is Ish Tam, which, like I said, it means a simple man. And there are other ways of translating that word Tam, such as complete, such as perfect, and also such as simple. Rashi explains Yaakov was not familiar with Esav's techniques. He doesn't know how to do all of these things. What does it mean he dwelled in tents? On a simple level, it means he was a shepherd. Shepherding is the opposite of hunting. To shepherd is actually to be in service of the world, to develop it, to populate it, to domesticate it. And of course, the most standard and traditional way of understanding why the Torah tells us that he was a tent dweller is that he studied the Torah of Shem and Aver, who were the Torah leaders of that generation. But Yaakov, he first tends to his father's flocks, and then afterwards he tends to the flocks of Lavan. And you don't find he's tending to his own sheep until much later, because he represents a type that is dedicated to the development and habitation of the world. Now, even according to the idea that dwelling in tents means that he was occupied with the study of Torah in the tent of Shem and Aver, his intention in studying Torah, which should be the intent of every person, every descendant of Yaakov, who wants to study Torah in this world. Why do we study Torah? Why do we study Torah? To be knowledgeable, to be able to lord knowledge over someone else, to be able to manipulate people. We study Torah in order to bring Hashem's light into the world. Mm. And the expression about Yaakov in particular, of being an Ish Tam, was that he was a man who wanted to give the world meaning and values by occupying himself with Torah and with the practicalities of life at the same time. Therefore, what is the expression about a person like Yaakov? He really wants to be a ladder connecting heaven and earth. And as you know, he had a dream in the beginning of next week's Torah portion, since you already skipped to 2 weeks from now, Parshat Vayishlach. In Parshat Vayetze, next week we're going to be reading about how Yaakov actually laid his head down at the spot of the Holy Temple, in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount, and he saw a vision of the ladder, and Hashem was at the top of the ladder and spoke to him. And when we begin to read Parshat Vayetze, we read in chapter 28 and verse 12, and he dreamt, and behold, a ladder was set earthward, and its top reached heavenward, and behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo. Angels of God were ascending and descending on it, on the ladder, right? But the word in Hebrew is bo. And as you know, Samara, bo actually doesn't mean on it. Bo means in it, or more specifically, can mean in him. In him. So there's a very, very beautiful teaching here in the Nefesh HaChaim of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, that the idea of that verse is that he himself was the ladder connecting heaven and earth, and that the angels of Hashem were ascending and descending bo in him, because he was the connector. Make a long story short, what we're trying to talk about here, the difference in these primal forces, these archetypes. Esav was always compelled to pursue the physical. And why did he have to be a hunter? Why was he chasing after the physical? Because the physical was not interested in him. The physical was running from him. And that's what a hunter is. He attempts by force or by subterfuge to grab those that are fleeing from him, right? Yaakov, on the other hand, because he represented bringing sanctity to the world and representing Hashem, the whole world wanted to be attached to him. And again, fast forwarding to next week, which is really okay because there isn't going to be a temple talk next week, so we might as well say something from next week. Again, what happens in Parshat Vayetze, very famously, we read about how when Yaakov went to sleep there, he took from the stones of the place, right? In chapter 28 and verse 11, we read, he took from the stones of the place which he arranged around his head and lay down in that place. But when he woke up from the dream, he took the stone that he placed around his head. So the verses change it from the plural that when he laid down, he took a bunch of little stones, and when he woke up, there was only one stone. This is a very, very famous idea that I'm sure you learned about when you were a little girl, Samara. And Rashi tells us it sounds whimsical, right? A lot of midrashim sound very, very fanciful. And we speak about this all the time on Temple Talk, how we have to have the ability to understand that the sages, when they employ the midrash, they are utilizing a poetic vehicle to tell us an earth-shattering, life-changing truth, but it's not literal. So Rashi tells us, the midrash, that the reason why when Yaakov lay down at that spot where he saw the ladder in Parshat Vayetze, next week he took from the stones of the place, but then when he woke up it says he took from the stone of the place, and the Torah again is very, very careful with the word, it's not a typo. Rashi says it's because all the stones were arguing with each other, and each one said, upon me shall the tzaddik lay his head, upon me shall the righteous person lay his head, and so Hashem made them all into one stone. Okay? Now, be that as it may, and it sounds again like some sort of fable, but what the teaching is really emphasizing is that Yaakov was charismatic in a sense, that the physical world wanted his presence, wanted to serve him, to be attached to him, because everything, even the inanimate level of creation, is involved in a constant struggle for elevation. Everything. This is a Torah teaching. Everything contains a spark of life force, even stones, everything. And everything is pining and desiring for closeness to Hashem. It's a universal struggle, which is only rectified in the Holy Temple, Samara. It's only rectified in the Holy Temple, where all aspects of creation, all strata of existence are represented in the daily service of the Holy Temple. So isn't it interesting that Esav is a hunter, and he's running all day chasing after things that are fleeing from him. But when it comes, in other words, what I'm trying to emphasize to you about the beauty of Torah study here is that nothing is incidental or anecdotal or minor. Even a teaching that seems to be like, oh, that's cute, the stones argued, so Hashem made them into one, is trying to emphasize to us this difference, that whereas everything is fleeing from Yaakov, everything is like, is like pulling itself together for Yaakov, as opposed to Esav, things running from it. The stones themselves are like, oh, pick me. So Hashem says, oh, I'll bind you all together. In other words, he was a unifying factor in creation, not a divisional factor in creation. That's what's being emphasized here.
Rabbi, would you say that in each of us has this these both aspects of us, and that part of the work that we have in this world is to build up our Yaakov and not necessarily.
I'm so glad you said that, because these archetypes are not only talking about the difference between Yaakov and Esav and the nations that they became. It's talking about the internal struggle within every person, and the difference between being a person of giving and devotion and dedication to being someone that's only about taking and about manipulation. And this is an inner struggle. Not to be a hunter, not to be cruel, not to be manipulative. And everyone has to ask themselves basically what the main force of their life is. And that's why you shall love your neighbor as yourself is the main principle of the Torah, because a person's attitude towards that is what establishes where they are in the world and who they're really serving and what their ego is. And it's basically all about ego. But again, this is the book of stories, because these are primary, fundamental, pivotal forces in creation that we're learning about now, which are going to be the dominant themes in the development of the saga of humanity. And the choices that we're reading about and that we're learning about are still our choices today. So that's the eternity of the Torah, and finding ourselves within the weekly Torah portions. It
would be more accurate to call it the book of teachings.
Yes, and it's the book of our life. Absolutely. And Torah means teaching, instruction for life. Samara, I want to thank you in my own name and in the name of Temple Talk and in the name of all of our millions of listeners for making this broadcast so special, for having joined me the past 2 weeks. Next week, you will be at an undisclosed location, I understand. And there will be no Temple Talk recorded. And then on December 10th and 17th, we'll have a new one with Yitzchak Reuven. And I'll be back, hopefully, God willing, with all of you during Hanukkah on the 24th. Again, hope to see everyone in those 3 locations and more coming up in the old US of A. And may Hashem protect us and guide us through these dark days of Kislev, soon to reveal the hidden light, not only emanating from the Hanukkah menorah, but emanating from inside each and every one of us. Shalom, and thanks for listening. Temple Talk.